Good afternoon, Bills Mafia. This is Bills Squad, part of the Locked On Bills podcast. I am Jeremy White. With me is Joe Marino and Jerry Ostrowski as we get ready for a draft day edition of Bills Squad. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. So Gametime, Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. We've got a lot to get to today. A final mock draft from Joe, the case for safety, 12 first-round grades from the Bills, a little bit on the offensive big board later on, how much do players pay attention to the draft, and so much more. But before anything else, gentlemen, good afternoon. Happy draft day.
What's going on?
Happy draft day, gentlemen. I'm excited for the speculation to be over, and we can finally know who the Bills are picking, where all these guys are going, and look at the league with a fresh set of eyes on, the direction of where these teams are going.
Exactly. I'm excited. I got my war room set up. This is the first time I've got multiple big screens. I'm going to be in my office, so I'll be role playing all night, watching this draft, taking notes, watching all the interesting stuff go down. Yeah, draft. Like I said before, this is one of the greatest months for me of the year because I got the Masters a couple weeks ago, and now I got the draft. So it's 3 weeks of just bliss as far as I'm concerned in sports.
Who's pacing more? Players, personnel people? You're a GM. You really want a guy to fall to you. You might be, just trying to pass the time until you get to your pick, or you're a player. I saw a picture of an offensive lineman out mowing the lawn, just trying to, keep your mind off whatever you can because it's one of the biggest nights of your life.
And Brandon Beane's self-admitted impulsive, right? He said that earlier this week, and so I'm sure he's feeling some type of way right now, especially at pick 30, where who knows how it's going to unfold and what players are going to be available. And it's such a important opportunity to improve the team. And so I'm sure Mr. Beane right now is feeling some type of way.
Well, the thing about it is it's so crazy is you put all this work in 365 days, right? A whole year's worth of work to this night, this 3-day segment of the draft. And you have about 1% control over what's going to happen, right? I think that's the biggest thing. You have no control. You have no idea. You're going into this thing unknown, and it's got to be unsettling, to be honest with you.
I'm just picturing down at One Bills Drive, they take Beane's phone away from him. No calls yet. You're getting antsy. You're getting impulsive. Anyway, Bills pick at number 30, and the mock drafts, this is the last day of mock drafts. So we've got all these names, some names you've seen before. And Joe, I know your latest mock, your final mock is out, and people can see that. And we were also seeing a little bit of, I don't know, quite movement, but it's almost like you're getting your last answer in. And for a number of high-profile NFL insiders, their last answer is Malachi Starks for the Bills. And safety kind of re-enters the conversation. It was always kind of there. Now it seems like it's back on the front page.
Yeah, it's what Dane Brugler, Peter Schrager, Benjamin Albright, 3 big names in the football world, linking the Bills to Malachi Starks. And I think my first thought is the next time that all the insiders have the Bills pick figured out would be the first time, right? There's never really been a scenario where everyone just kind of knew exactly who the Bills were going to draft. And I think with safeties in particular, as somebody who's, I've written a lot of mock drafts in my life, they're always difficult to slot. They're very difficult to slot. And you feel like they're first-round worthy players, and then you kind of get to the end and, well, we got to put these safeties somewhere. And you look at the Bills, and you could probably talk yourself into it. I know there's some parallels with Bills cornerbacks coach Jamil Adai working with Starks during their time together at Georgia. And here's what I'll say about Malachi Starks. It's not my favorite idea just because I don't have a lot of concern about the safety position, and I don't really think the Bills would maximize their opportunity to improve the football team by investing pick 30 in Malachi Starks. But I love Malachi Starks. He's a first-round grade for me, top 20 player on my board. I did a Twitter search yesterday as this was all kind of coming together, and I was like, have I ever tweeted anything about Malachi Starks? And back in September, I had a tweet that said, Malachi Starks is insanely good. He's a very good football player. And so while we can certainly have our preferences as to what the Bills should do and how they maximize their opportunity to improve the football team, you'd have a hard time not believing that there's a heck of an argument that he's the best player on the board. And maybe that trumps a lot of things. Maybe there's scenarios that exist where it's just undeniably the right thing to do with the pick. And so it's not my favorite idea, but I can absolutely talk myself into it.
I think you got to look at it in two scenarios. One is this old-fashioned draft manipulation by agents? Okay. I think that agents still talk to guys like Albright and Brugler and those guys, get stuff out there, make people believe that a team is super interested so that you put some pressure on some teams drafting before to go ahead and make that pick. So I do not put that past anybody. I think that still happens, and I think it's just good old-fashioned manipulation. I think the other way you got to look at that is this. At 30, if all these guys that Buffalo really covets are not there, they can't make that trade up. And now you're sitting there looking at Starks. Is the value of drafting Starks, even though it's a room that you feel you've got some pretty decent pieces, you spent a high draft pick on Cole Bishop last year, right? Is that value of taking him a better value than trading down and getting another second-round pick? And I think that's, if you listen to Bean's press conference on Tuesday, many, many times he referenced value picks, value where those guys are. And I would think anyway, a guy like Starks, who is ranked in some people's rankings in the top 10, is a better value than trading out of the first and going and getting, an extra pick. And the thing is, and I agree with what you said yesterday, Joe, on your show. If you do this, maybe not the best scenario, but it does help this football team. But then you got a ton of pressure on you at these other positions in the second round and finding a way to get into the third to get another one. So those other picks better be right.
I want to ask you guys the kind of safety that he is, because like you said, Joe, you've got a first round grade on him. And if the board falls a certain way, like as Jerry's just kind of laying out, like defensive tackles start to go, you got a lot of defensive tackles with first round grades. They're all gone. Now you're 30 and he's the best player on your board. What type of safety is he? Because the board plays out and you play the board. What type of safety would he be? Kind of a reaction, a mock reaction here. The pick is in, it's Starks. How is he used, and what happens with Rapp and Bishop in that kind of scenario?
Well, to me, his best ability is how he defends deep zones. And so you think one high center fielder, you want to play middle of the field, close coverages, cover one, cover three, which are coverages the Bills use. You have a very instinctive, rangy guy to play on the roof of the defense that can really break on the football and make special plays. His interception reel is about as good as you'll ever see. I mean, just insane ability to take a good angle and make a play on the football. And so you would get big play ability. You'd get that Micah Hyde ability on the top of your defense once again. And this past year, he got to play a little bit in some lower alignments in the slot, showing his man coverage ability. You'd get that type of guy. He's a good tackler. I don't think you're not going to watch him and say, oh my goodness, this is the most physical safety that I've ever seen. But I think he would complement a guy like Cole Bishop really, really well. And I think where the Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop combination, the way that they would work together is Rapp is your over-the-top one-high player, and your low safety would be Cole Bishop. In replacing Taylor Rapp in the lineup, you get a whole lot more athleticism. I mean, you get a ton more athleticism. And I think Rapp's a smart player. He tackles well. He's physical. But the ability to just cover ground and be a better matchup-specific player, if you do want to play more man and trust him to carry tight ends or occasionally some of the slot receivers down the field, he gives you the skill set to do that. And so it's you think about guys that can change the math, right? And Starks is a guy that can truly be a center fielder over the top. There's not a lot of guys that can really do that. And that allows you to space the field differently, knowing that you can trust him over the top of your defense. So there's a ton to like. I mean, there's not a whole lot of downside other than, well, they didn't fix positions that maybe I thought were more important.
I think the takeaway skills are a big thing. If you looked at this defense last year, if they didn't lead the NFL in takeaways last year, just how historically bad they probably would have been. They weren't good as it was, but the takeaway numbers were insane. So they put a big onus upon that on that defensive side of the ball. You add that to it, then you got the versatility. He can play free, he can play strong, he can play down over the slot and play nickel corner, which we got Terrion Johnson, but he's getting older. He's had some issues, and I don't really know. We've got some guys that can do it, Cam Lewis and the likes, but do we really have a true backup at that spot? I think he has the ability to come down. Like Joe said, he's not just, he's not Steve Atwater when it comes to tackling, but he is willing and he's able. And you can get him down, play B-gap like that nickel corner of ours does, plays a ton of B-gap, can make plays, getting guys on the ground. So I think it's kind of just he fits the Bills mold and what they love in safeties and DBs.
He started a lot of games there at Georgia. 3-year starter. Started as a freshman, was freshman of the year on a national championship team. He's been in high leverage games. It's funny, like for me, safety was off the radar. And I don't know, Joe, if this is something wrong with me, but as you were describing on Locked On Bills, why you like the player, but the defensive tackle need is bigger. I don't disagree with that. It almost talked me into Starks because, we all know the Bills have their holes. But if you're looking at a zoomed out, bigger picture of what I want to come out of this draft than any draft is, I want a player that's going to land on the NFL's top 50 list. I want someone that the league knows about. And, you're talking about how the way he changes the numbers, like that to me is more than just plugging a need. That's not quite swinging for the fences because it might not work and you don't know how good he ultimately translates to be. So while it's not necessarily as big a hole, the idea of blue chipper or game breaker, something like that, that's to me what it feels like a lot of people are talking about the Bills ultimately needing. And whether that's on the defensive line or in the secondary, difference makers, not just role fillers, I would say.
Yeah, I think that just depends on your perception of what defensive linemen could be there and what they bring to the table. And I think that they can get an impact defensive lineman, but maybe that was something that Brandon Beane was warning us about when he was asked about what the strength of the draft was. And he said, well, it's a defensive line.
Right.
Maybe that was calibrating our expectations that we hear you. It's a need, but we feel comfortable with attacking that on day 2 if the board falls a certain way and they do go with either a safety or, of course, a corner, right? I mean, corner conversation still exists for this team. I mean, if it's not Malachi Starks being mocked, you're still seeing a lot of Trey Amos. And so I wonder if there was some intent behind being honest about the depth of the defensive line class.
I also think whatever they do at 30, and I agree with all these opinions as far as it needs to be an immediate impact player. He needs to be on the field and he needs to be playing. And I think Starks has the ability to do that, and he's a high IQ guy. He's highly versatile, plays a lot of positions. I don't know why I would think that was great. I mean, maybe, that I love versatile players that can play multiple spots, but to me, that's highly appealing. I just see football player all over him, championship football player. And while it wouldn't be my first choice, I wouldn't be upset at it.
We're on Mondays and Thursdays. Since our last show, we learned of the numbers on the Trey White deal, and we heard Brandon Beane talk about Trey White and heard from Trey White as well. So are we looking at that as a little more serious an option than maybe we thought when initially reported?
Well, I don't think the contract numbers scream starter, right? They're very modest numbers. But the way that Beane talked about him, and certainly said, nothing's promised or guaranteed, but he started talking about Charles Tillman and when they signed him in Carolina in 2015 to come in and start for their defense, and they went to the Super Bowl that year, and Tillman was 34 years old. I mean, Trey just turned 30. I mean, it certainly felt like there's a lot of at least hope that he can be the answer opposite of Christian Benford. And it's going to be a little bit tough. I mean, even at this stage of Trey White's career and what the last few years have looked like, someone's have to come in here and put that guy on the bench. Right? That's a big deal. It's going to be a rookie, a first-round pick. What if that doesn't happen? Now you drafted a first-round corner that's going to be a reserve. That feels more digestible on day 2. And so whether or not the fan reaction or the outside reaction is, well, this doesn't change anything, I think internally maybe it does, where the Bills do look at Trey White and then, of course, Dane Jackson as a reserve player with Jamarcus Ingram to go with Christian Benford and think, yeah, you know what? I don't think we have to do this. The Bills have had bigger needs at corner and didn't pick the corner. Like this has happened before. And so I'm kind of calibrating my expectations for the Bills to maybe wait on corner, contrary to where, a lot of the mock drafters are projecting still Trey Amos as the pick, which I could see, but I'm open to the idea that won't be the direction the Bills go.
Kind of a question to you guys. You hear the terms load management, you hear everybody eats, tailback, running back by committee. With having Dane Jackson and Trey White together, 2 older players, how do you feel about letting both of those guys get pretty meaningful snaps in a game and almost kind of 2 players for one? So you've got veterans, but you're not putting the amount of work on them so you can keep them healthier with their age.
They've done it before at the position, right? It's not a normal thing, but the Bills do have a history of doing that. So I think it's on the table.
Yeah, part of the success of this team over the years, you could take this to both sides of the ball. They've had a lot of success, and they've done it with holes or with gaps. I think about corner number 2 and think most of the time that Sean McDermott has had good defenses, it's kind of with the flavor of the week at that position, whether it's
Right.
EJ Gaines or, Josh Norman for a cup of coffee or Levi Wallace.
Kevin Johnson.
Yeah, they've sought that corner 2, and it's never come to fruition to have the 2 guys they can count. And maybe Douglas and Benford was a pretty good one too when they had those 2 in Benford's first season in terms of takeaways. So it's interesting. I almost want to say, like, you'll never have your perfect defense, but of course you should try to build it, right? You should try to build Sean McDermott's perfect defense.
Yeah, I totally agree. It would be different, but if that creates availability later in the season, which has been an issue for this defense, not a bad idea.
All right, we're going to get a break in. When we get back, a couple things to get to, including Joe's final mock. He's got his final mock up heading into tonight's draft. And do players pay attention? The Bills have a number of players who might want to know what's going to go on tonight. It's Bill Squad, back in a moment. Hey, ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. Between dining out and all these other things, money comes in, and guess what? Monarch Money can be your personal CFO, giving you full visibility, control over your finances, not just a budgeting app, complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money, you start building wealth. Whether you're getting insights into how much you're spending at that one grocery store you think is a little pricey, it's all in one convenience. You're not juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, so back here on Bill's Squad, Jeremy White, Joe Marino, Jerry Ostrowski. Jerry, do players pay attention? How much are these players pacing? We joked in the first segment, the prospects, the GMs. How about the guys in the league that are watching all these young kids come in?
Most definitely players watch, and I'll give you a little background, a little story. I was on the Bills practice squad, got pulled up with 4 games to go, went down to Miami, my first game, went in the second quarter, and basically didn't leave the field the rest of the season. So you kind of get that feeling like, hey, maybe I made it. Maybe I'm part of this future plan, right? Then you watch the draft, and I believe the Buffalo Bills with the 13th pick select guard Reuben Brown, Pittsburgh. And you're like, okay. And you're back in the middle of the battle again. So, yeah, I mean, it's players do pay attention, and they pay attention for different purposes. One is, some of the guys like a Josh Allen and the dudes that are solidified. They want to see who their teammates are or what are the added weapons I'm going to get for the next season. And then there's guys like me that were cut 3 times. You run paranoid quite a bit. So you need to make sure you know who your competition is and who you're going to go up against. And obviously Reuben Brown, one of the all-time greats for the Buffalo Bills, all-time great guard in the NFL, probably will be in the Hall of Fame someday. But, yeah, we definitely pay attention, especially guys like me. I was a football junkie. I was a fan before I was a player. So I was into this stuff. I remember one time in the huddle, Jay Reamersma dropped the ball, and I wore him out at the TV timeout because I had him starting on my fantasy team that week. And I'm like, dude, you're killing me, right? So, yeah, I mean, most definitely pay attention. And you just, some people call it paranoia, fellas. Others call it total awareness. That's what I like to call it.
Jerry, what about, of course, you're in a position group and you're probably doing the math yourself. Like, well, we're going to keep 10
Right.
offensive linemen. All right, what does this look like? What are my chances? But what about from the perspective of your own beliefs as to what the team should do and how they should improve things? And, you're around the guys, you probably have understand where there's strengths, where there's weaknesses. Are you
Right.
thinking about that side of it as well?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think you just have to be honest with yourself. I mean, you know how you fit into this thing, and you're just hoping for an opportunity, but you understand what the roster needs. You understand what your team needs to get better. And, I go back to that pick. I mean, that's exactly what the Bills needed. I mean, it worked out. Ruben comes in and is a fixture at left guard. I end up going to right guard, and then 3 other positions, right? So it's one of those situations where you have to be honest with yourself. You can't sit there, and if you constantly try to figure the numbers out, it limits you from doing what you need to do every day in practice and on the field in preseason games. You have to be present, understand what your job is, and try to drown all that stuff out. But it's human nature. I mean, you think about it and you understand it.
Taking it to the next step, does it depend player to player or locker room to locker room? How about once those guys come in? Hey, rookie, that's here to take my job or compete with me? I mean, are some guys just walls up, not helping that guy in any way? Or does it come down to the locker room, the coaching staff, things like that?
Truly, there are some guys that don't help. I was never one of those people. I felt that if your teammates were better, then your team was better. And you just had to understand and be comfortable with where you sat, and as far as the placement of the team and the group. And it's just like the situation is going to happen probably this week, maybe even possibly tonight. First round cornerback comes in. Trey White and Dane Jackson, those guys are going to help this guy out and get him up to speed. It's not like they're not going to do that. I mean, it's for the betterment of the team. And when it comes down to it, that's ultimately what the goal is, your team to be good. Yes, your personal well-being and stuff is part of that, and you need to be competitive, but you don't have to be a jerk or a clown and not give a guy help and still go out and know what you need to do to make the football team. I mean, you can separate that.
Jerry, you were a 10th round draft pick. You said you were cut 3 times, but then ultimately you go on to start over 100 games
right
for the Buffalo Bills. And there's not a long list of people that can say that they've done that. Did it ever change for you? Were you ever 3-4 years into being a starter and thinking, you know what, do what you need to do? Or did you always have that mentality of, I was a 10th round pick that was cut 3 times, every day I have to earn it?
I had that mentality. Every day I had to earn it. I mean, it was I never was comfortable, ever. I never, ever was comfortable. And the situation that I went through to make it would not allow me to be comfortable. Comfort for me was not good, because it creates comfort creates complacency, and then you start not doing the things you need to do. So to have that constant voice in the back of your head, I've said it a million times, all the things you need to be a good pro athlete are not conducive to being a good husband or father, or I mean, there's a lot of bad things that you got to, ego and self and all these different things, but it's just what you have to do to condition yourself to win that battle. And that ultimately was the goal. I mean, until the regular season game started, your battle was with guys in the same room as you, and the battle was with yourself. And so, no, I mean, I never was comfortable. I mean, I was always running with a little bit of doubt in the back of my head, but it was a good motivator for me.
Do you ever get numb to it? Like, just knowing that you're going to go into camp with, at your position group, probably O-line, 7-8 guys that they're going to be with you for a long time. They're going to put a lot into it, and then they're going to disappear. Did that ever become normal? Was it always hard? I can imagine that's got to be a very unique circumstance.
It is. And I don't think you make friends with people until week 2 or 3 of the season, to be honest with you, because even guys that make the final cut before the first game, a lot of dudes come in, they're like, all right, next thing you know, they're renting apartments. And I'm like, dude, you don't need to do that. We need to wait a little bit, slow down. And there's a million stories out there of guys buying houses and renting apartments, and then 3 days before the first game, they get released, and now they've got leases and they've got mortgages and they've got to figure out what to do. And it's a weird world, man. It's a weird way to live. And, I always say you can only burn hot for so long. And when that flame goes out, it's time to go find something else to do.
We've got Joe's final mock draft to get to. I'm going to put it on the screen here, Joe. You can take us through the process, and Jerry and I will pick it apart if we like what you ultimately did. But it's your final mock draft. So you've got Kenneth Grant, Landon Jackson, Jacob Parrish. Lots of options here for what the Bills ultimately do. Take us through what it was that got you to these spots and how you liked it. Because sometimes can't you finish a draft and think like, I hated that thing. It didn't go the way I wanted it to.
You're right about that. I certainly tried to be as predictive as I possibly can. And this wouldn't this wouldn't necessarily be my preferred haul. This was me just trying to be as predictive as possible. And the way that I talked myself into Kenneth Grant at number 30, not only is it one of my preferred options, but every time I've ever listened to Sean McDermott or Brandon Beane talk about team building, it's the trenches. And defensively, we got to be good up front. And then just kind of surveying this defensive tackle situation and listening to Brandon Beane talk about how, they're going to draft with kind of future needs with expiring contracts in mind and being mindful of the Daquan Jones situation. And, thinking that, okay, that's the reason to lean into the trench player as opposed to the corner. And then, of course, the rest of the day was spent thinking about a safety, which was an unexpected angle that I wasn't going to have to consider. So that's how I land on Grant. Then for Landon Jackson, I don't think he gets to 56. So I was able to do a trade. It was 109 and 56 for 49. And that gets the Bills in a position to draft Landon Jackson, who's a prospect that I think they really like. He said that they've met a lot. The Bills are one of two formals that Landon had at the combine. I think he's the style of rusher that the Bills would like, and I think they're going to want to get that need. So, again, trenches. That was weighing heavily on my mind.
What style is that, if I could interrupt you? The style of rusher the Bills want. What style do you think that is right now?
Well, I think it's the compression style, ability to play through contact. You're not going to watch Landon Jackson and think, wow, this guy's got a ton of bend, right? Flexibility. But he can play through angles and use his length, use his heavy hands to soften and play through contact. And I think he takes good angles. I think he's a good run defender. I think he's got a good inside move. Kind of in some ways like a Greg Rousseau. Kind of in some ways like an AJ Epinesa, but a more dynamic version of that. So I think he's super Billsy. I know that's not a term that people really like when referring to the defensive line. But until they really go away from that mold, that's kind of where I think. So I went trenches. And then I think they got to go with the corner at some point, and that kind of left the 62nd pick to go corner, Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State. If the Bills wanted Trent McDuffie a few years ago, there's a lot of Trent McDuffie and Jacob Parrish. I think my pro comp to him is actually DJ Reed, that kind of mold, where if the Bills are really going to run more press man coverage, want to be tighter in their coverage shells, Jacob Parrish can do that. And he's physical player that can tackle. He loves to tackle. Watch him against Arizona State. This guy was loving the opportunities to square up Cam Scatabo and tackle him. And he's got a wrestling background, good corner. I think that he would make a lot of sense. And then I get to 101, Torrey Horton. This is a receiver the Bills had in for a pre-draft visit. And same with Jacob Parrish, pre-draft visitor. Torrey Horton, a pre-draft visitor, kind of later in the process. And I think he's an underrated prospect in this class. You'll love him, Jeremy. First of all, he plays receiver, so that's a good start for you loving him.
That's right.
But he's got low 4.4 speed. He's probably one of the more dynamic field stretchers in this class. He's a little out of sight, though, because 2 productive seasons in 22 and 23, over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Then this past year, he missed the last 7 games with a knee injury, but he ran low 4.4s just a few months ago. So I'm guessing he's good to go in terms of health. But this guy could also be a big-time punt returner, over 16 yards per return, 3 return touchdowns in his career at Colorado State. And I think that's an important part of the direction the Bills go at receiver. It can't just be a field stretcher. They have to do something else to get that jersey on game days and give the chances to stretch the field. And I think the punt return ability is a big deal. And I think the Bills would love to move on from Brandon Codrington, who's become just a punt returner. End of the year, they were using Ray Davis and Ty Johnson as a kick returner. Brandon Codrington can't play a lick of corner. He also doesn't cover kicks and punts. I just think it's too limited of a role. I think he did a good job. It's too limited of a role to want to roster that guy. And I think a player like Torrey Horton helps achieve that. Jared Penning, the Bills had a Zoom meeting with him. Corn-fed Midwest guy. They love that in their offensive lineman. I think they'll pick one at some point. Sean Dolak. I don't think he's a fit for a lot of teams. He is a fit for the Bills because the measurables are not very good in terms of size, but he's pretty similar size-wise to Terrell Bernard. I think they need some linebacker depth. And then I didn't love this pick of Maliki Matavio out of UCLA, but I think the Bills will pick a tight end at some point. And so he was just kind of the one that was left, and I put him in there because he's 6'5", 260 pounds, can play in line. And I think that's the most important part about this tight end 3. Have to be able to play in line. That way, if something happens with Dawson Knox, you're not putting Dalton Kincaid in a situation where it kind of takes away from what he needs to be able to do as a flex player.
Yeah, Jerry, I know you were talking tight end 3 recently about this idea that they need to add a little depth at the spot.
Yeah, definitely. I think that this is a spot where, again, we're talking about futures, okay? Are you really going to go into this season with Zach Davidson being your 3, a guy that's a field stretcher, but end of the line blocker, not his thing, right? And you're adding that skill set to a guy that you picked in the first round 2 years ago that has a very similar skill set, and then an older tight end who's willing, but he is older, right? And, so really you're not getting much true blocking out of that position. You're saying that we're more worried about stretching the field. So I think it is a spot where you need to look at, get them in the building, groom them. And then, if you have to make a move on Dawson Knox because of salary cap, you've got a guy that's ready to go. But I will say this, Joe, my son Jackson is going to be fired up with the Penning pick from Northern Iowa. While he did not coach him, my son is one of the new offensive line coaches at Northern Iowa this year. So he knows him very, very well. Obviously, Spencer Brown played there, and you are correct. They are corn-fed big dudes that play physical, and it is a offensive line mecca in Cedar Falls.
And Joe, looking at the mock, 10 players, 10 picks down to 7, right? Is that a trade up for Horton? So 2 trades up, and ultimately 10 goes down to 7.
Yeah, I wound up going from 132 to 101. I gave up 169 and 170. So that's kind of the flavor of the trades I'm anticipating is I don't think the Bills are going to move up significantly in round 1. I think they want to get some specific targets, maybe move up into the second round, and then ultimately, they're getting into the third round somehow. And so I think that was kind of the thought process there.
And that's like a 31 pick move. So that's almost a full round. To me, this is what part of the draft that I like. The action there, we would be sitting here saying, oh, they love this kid. If they moved all the way up that far, there's definitely a tier break for them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Torrey Horton, and that's why I did it for Torrey Horton, who I think is a little out of sight, out of mind, man. But I think we might look back at this thing and wonder, how did that guy fall?
Joe, one of the things I want to go back and talk about, you said something earlier, and you're talking about style of defensive end, and this is an area that I'm having trouble with. Are the Bills wanting that Groot-type defensive end, or would they be willing to draft a guy like, say, Ezeraku from Boston College or Pierce from Tennessee, the more pure pass rusher as opposed to more of a dual player? And, you talk about rushing and compressing the pocket. Is that due to the fact that the Bills are so reliant on their rush lanes and rushing forward? They don't like to do too much else, so they want that compression style guy to keep everything inside. What is when you brought that up, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I certainly at one point would have told you that they only liked compression style rushers, and then they signed Leonard Floyd in free agency, and they signed Von Miller in free agency, and they drafted Javon Solomon, who it feels like Brandon Beane at every turn has told us, well, we really not a target for us, but kind of felt like we should pick him because of the production and the importance of getting after the quarterback. So I think they've warmed up to the idea to get that type of player, and they've certainly met with Olu Oluwafemi out of UCLA, who fits that pure pass rush type guy. So I hope that they're open to more ideas to complement their pass rush arsenal, to give them more skill sets to attack the pocket. But maybe some of the moves this year with Bosa and Hoyt kind of suggest they're kind of back to that, power style and versatility.
Draft day is here. We will continue with some offensive ideas. We're going to look at the offensive Bills board from Joe, which we did not get to last episode. But before that, when we return, the James Cook saga has perhaps one more chapter written. We'll get to that. It's coming up. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. When it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. It's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get your qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So the James Cook saga, perhaps this is the Dalvin Cook version of it. Dalvin tweeted, retweeting something that Adam Schefter posted. Schefter just simply pointed out, no, James Cook is not at phase 1 of whatever this is. This phase, guys, quarterbacks can throw to receivers who can't be covered by defensive backs. It's football-ish. I'm not even sure what running backs would do in this phase. But either way, James Cook's not there. Adam Schefter pointed that out. And then Dalvin Cook upped the price from $15 million a year to $20 million a year. So what do we do with it?
What you got, Jerry? Go ahead, man.
Well, we talked the other day about Shedeur Sanders following the Deion Sanders playbook word for word, line for line. These two almost are like the reincarnation of the Diggs brothers, right? I mean, it's the same stuff. Again, I mean, it's part of negotiations and it's part of it. They've obviously kicked the hornet's nest and got the Bills fan base. The mafia is riled up about it. It'll all take care of itself. And the best thing for the Buffalo Bills is they don't have to do anything. He signed for one more year. So he's going to either play or he's going to pay a lot of fines. And I expect him to be there at some point. And I think Jeremy made a good point. You can hardly put the football on the field right now in these workouts. So I'm sure he's working out hard with somebody elsewhere, whether it be Florida, Texas, I don't know. I'm not too concerned about it. I think it's kind of funny how we seem to take the bait, or some people take the bait when these things are posted. I just swiped through it. I wasn't even I'm numb to it. So yeah, I mean, it'll take care of itself. We'll see what Cook does this year. And if he allows all this stuff to creep into the season to where he's not as productive last year, all that's going to do is hurt his chances on renegotiation. So it'll take care of itself, and I'm not real worried about it.
I tend to agree with you, Jerry. And it was never my expectation that James Cook was going to be at this phase of the voluntary offseason program. Where I have a level of concern is how much does this linger? Does this bleed into the mandatory OTAs? Does this bleed into camp? And what I don't want to see happen is this get to the point where the Bills offense is going to have to start behind the eight ball because James Cook's not around. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks before the season, he's going to report, or they're going to come to terms on a deal. And all of a sudden he's got to get calloused up for the season. And, that's the part that I'm not interested in. And certainly when you're already staring at two of your defensive linemen and Hoyt and Ogunjobi not available for the first 6 weeks, I don't want to be sitting there worried about James Cook and if he's ready to go. And so I think at what point is this now a problem for your football team? It's not yet. And I think you make a good point where he doesn't really have any leverage in this situation. And I don't think he's Jonathan Taylor to the point where he can, hold the Bills over the fire and ultimately get what he wants. But I just don't want this to linger to the point where this offense now has a setback to start the season.
Well, the other thing is this. I don't think I remember anyway one instance in NFL history where a guy goes about renegotiations in this manner, eventually gets the money that he wants, and then has this unbelievable season to back up the money that he just got. A lot of times there's kind of that human nature side of it that falls into play where you're like, all right, I got my money. Ooh, okay, I can relax. And the last thing that you need is players relaxing. They need to have that edge. And I agree with you. I mean, he needs to be ready to go. And if he wants that kind of money, then this season is really, really important to him. He's got to put back-to-back seasons together and show that he's worth that kind of money. Now, granted, I don't think it's even going to come from Buffalo if he does have that kind of season, because there's too many needs out there. We've got too many of our own that probably need to be signed before him. And what is the stat? Brandon Beane has never signed a running back to a second contract. So history does not look all that great for James Cook. So the best thing he can do, be compliant, show up, work his tail end off, have a great season, and then let the chips fall where they may.
I don't know that Beane's been asked yet. Philosophically, would you sign a running back to a second contract? And I don't know how he would answer. It'd be negotiating in the media. How about that as a conversation? We went through a time in the NFL where running back became totally disposable. Nobody do it. You don't ever need to pay a guy. And I think we've kind of drifted back to a healthy balance. Barkley makes a difference for the Eagles. Derrick Henry for the Ravens. James Cook for the Bills. I do think Cook makes a big difference for them. He's their most explosive runner by a lot. He's 2 years in a row been top 10 in yards gained over expected, rushing yards over expected. So I don't think it's as easy as just see you later. Anybody can do the job anymore, which is where the NFL seemed to go for a while. Where do you guys land on the value of the position right now?
Well, I think for the Bills in particular, the most important thing that James Cook provides is that big playability, right? He can really hit those home runs, and that matters a lot for this offense. And I would be concerned about replacing that. I do also wonder how much James Cook benefits from the Bills situation with a quarterback like Josh Allen, with the run scheme, with the offensive line, and how they've really a very creative run blocking team with how they deploy the 6th offensive lineman, with how they will play, a guy like Mac Hollins in kind of some inline situations, good blocking tight ends, the fullback. Like there's a lot that benefits James Cook in Buffalo that I think would benefit a different running back as well. I am not like fundamentally against the idea of paying a running back. I think where I struggle is specifically it being James Cook. And it's like part of it is the snap percentage, right? Like it's, the top backs that get this money are 75 to really 90% of snaps players for their respective teams. I don't want James Cook to play that many snaps for the Bills. I thought it was very beneficial to him and the Bills offense and the team that it was this 50-25-25 split last year. And he was healthy down the stretch. Like he was awesome against the Broncos. He was awesome against the Chiefs in the playoffs. And I think that was a product of, hey, you're not playing another 25 to 30% of snaps. And so that's an important layer to the conversation. Like, do you want that? Is that an important part? And for James Cook, that we talk about the value of the big plays, there's also value in being able to pass protect and be invaluable for your team in 2-minute situations. Right. He's not the closer for this football team. When the Bills are on 4-minute offense, it's not him on the field. So there's some really important things that I'd want to have from my back that I pay big money to that James Cook doesn't provide.
Exactly. When you pay a guy that kind of money at the running back position, I expect Barkley type, Henry type numbers, tons of plays, guys that are workhorses. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want my tailback getting the ball 30, 35 times a game, because that means Josh Allen doesn't have the ball as much as he needs it. And as much as Cook is a vital piece of this offense still goes through and flows through 17. And when you give the ball, Brady likes to run the ball, and I'm great with that. I think they run the ball well. They do a great job of it. They want to control things. But that being said, Allen is still the integral part of this offense. He demands the ball more than anybody. So if pay at the running back spot is predicated on how many times you're on the field, I don't know. And I'm like you, Jeremy. I love James Cook. I want him on this football team. But at some point in time, you've got to make a decision. What's best for the team and who needs to get paid in these scenarios? And unfortunately for James Cook, I think he's probably a little bit down the list right now with the needs we have coming up.
Yeah, they had an offseason of lots of extensions. The thing I would say about this for Bills fans is to, like you guys mentioned, take the bait. I don't think it's that dramatic yet. The only thing that really happened is Cook told us his number and his brother's out there tweeting numbers. But all the insider reports and anything we've heard are that he plans to play this year. It's one of the first things I saw, like Albert Breer or something like that. Someone like that said, well, Cook is excited, eager to play, prove himself. I don't think I've seen anyone float the idea that he'll miss meaningful stuff yet. When we get to that, like you said, Joe, starting behind the 8 ball offensively, but we're not there yet. And I don't know that we necessarily even have to get there, because Cook does have a lot to prove. And if you're in his spot, the best thing you can do is go produce.
Yeah.
You're not going to get any more money by not producing,
right?
Unless the two sides are close. I would say that might be one thing I want to include. Maybe you're close enough and he feels he could lean in a little bit more, but I just don't think it has to be dramatic yet.
No, I don't think so either. And I think the biggest thing with this is if we're looking at phase 3 of OTAs and he's still not available, then maybe that's an issue. But right now with what they're doing, this is, and I know everybody hates it, this is part of it. This is, with social media and the way things are going now, this is part of negotiations in professional sport. It happens across all leagues. You don't have to like it, but it's part of it. And it's something that happens. And I would suggest you use it as entertainment. I mean, it to me, it's a bit amusing, and I enjoy seeing some of it. It can get kind of fun.
All right, James Cook, we wait. No running back in your mock draft there, Joe.
It's the rosterability conversation that makes it difficult for me. I think you'd love to get ahead of it. I don't think you have to get ahead of a need at running back. Right. And I think if the Bills enter next offseason and that's the biggest thing they have to get figured out, great. So if you draft a running back, you're not going to roster 4, and I don't think you want to sit around and cross your fingers that somebody gets hurt. And I think Darrington Evans is kind of like a low-key X factor in this conversation. Like, they planned on him making this roster last year. They committed one of their limited opportunities to bring a guy off of injured reserve and then onto the active roster. It never got to the point where they had a spot for him, and then they brought him back this year. And so he had I thought he had a good camp in preseason last year. And so, like, maybe he's their ultimate hedge in the event that things get real dicey with James Cook.
Up next, the rest of the offense. It will likely get some attention in this draft. Joe has a receiver in the 4th round they move up for. So the receiver ideas and Joe's Bills-specific offense big board coming up. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. So use Gametime for last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs. I like to do this when I'm visiting a city. Hey, who's playing tonight? What can I get in on? And the all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Bills offensive big board for Joe, because we do have to get to not just defensive tackles, defensive end, corners, and safeties, but the offense will need a little bit of a little sprinkle of some offense in here, right, guys? So, Joe, we could talk receiver. You had Torrey Horton, Colorado State, but you do have some other names on the big board offensively that could be in the mix anywhere in this draft.
Yeah, I think that there's 3 positions where I'm expecting the Bills to draft a player, receiver being one of them. And it's fascinating, and I'm really excited to get your guys' takes on, like, when the right time is to pick the receiver. It seems like they've met with a ton of guys. They're all on this list. I made sure that I evaluated anyone that the Bills had in for a pre-draft visit, but it's a lot of guys that you'd expect, like rounds 3 to 6, that run fast. there's a lot of them in this class. I'm like, holy crap, another 4-3 receiver in this class. So they got a lot of speed there. They're going to pick one at some point, and I don't have a ton of convictions as to when the right time is. So I'm curious to get your takes on that. I think they're going to get that tight end 3. We've talked about that. And I think they will draft at least one offensive lineman. I think that's just, you should just pick an offensive lineman every year. And, certainly getting ahead of the potential needs with McGovern and Edwards on expiring deals. And then even if you have the pipeline ready to go with Van Granger and Alec Anderson or a Tylen Grable ready to step in, well, now you got to replenish that. So I think they'll at least take some type of swing there. And this is the horizontal board. This is how I personally value these prospects. I was light on offensive linemen in terms of putting them on here. If you go to my big board post in the Substack that I have, you'll see I think I did 161 players. There's a lot more offensive linemen represented, but those are just, if you're on the screen here, you're seeing some of my favorite options just kind of at random points. But I'm really interested. I mean, it's been a defensive heavy pre-draft conversation. I think it's going to be a defense heavy draft, but that doesn't mean there's not investments coming on offense. And it's kind of interesting to consider when those investments might come.
Yeah. I mean, I would think the addition at receiver is second round, late second, or into the 4th. And is there a second round sweet spot this year? I mean, part of my obsession with receiver the last couple of years, there've been a couple of really nice classes of guys that I thought would fit the Bills really well. Last year, there were a bunch of those guys. They go out and they get Keon Coleman. The year before, whether it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, before Khalil Shakir had popped, I thought he'd be a good idea, or Zay Flowers, who won at all 3 levels. What I've thought the Bills should probably always be trying to add is a separator on the outside. Not just a guy on the outside, but a separator on the outside. That's what Stephon Diggs was for them. And that doesn't mean you have to go all the way, all out. But separation to me is something that I just think I have to guess again this year. Mac Hollins wasn't that, right? He's gone. Josh Palmer, maybe. He's got good speed. There's some potential there. the speed element to me is important, but it's about separation for me and guys that can win on the outside that Josh Allen can trust. And I don't know, Joe, is this the draft for this? Jerry, is this the draft for this? Because I'm not here table pounding for guys. There are some guys I like, but it just seems like last year was the year for that. Maybe we revisit again next year. But right now, round 2, round 4 for one of these guys, and maybe an upside kind of guy, not really a proven product.
Well, I think the big deal is what are you going to do with the 2 fourth-round picks, and how does the first round go? Do you have to burn some of that capital to move up into the first? If you do, can you still get yourself back into the third? If the Bills stick and pick at 30 and don't burn any of those later draft picks, especially the 2 fourths, maybe you package those and move into the third, and that's where you go ahead and try to get your receiver after you've gone ahead and address defensive need with your first 3 picks, with the first and the 2 in the second round. So I think the third round possibly could be the area if Brandon Beane can trade back up into it. But I think when you look at this draft, especially at receiver, after that second round, after that third round is maybe when you get, okay, this guy's a really good route runner, gets separation from running routes. He's not fast. Or you get the guy he is an absolute burner, but he runs a go ball and a post, and that's it, and you got to develop the rest of it. So I think that's where you are later in the draft. What type of receiver do you want? There's going to be ample burners later, but you're going to have to develop them as far as the route tree goes and those types of things. You're going to take that natural ability and try and turn it into a multifaceted product at the wide receiver spot. So really, I think the wide receiver draft kind of depends on if there's draft capital burned early to move up, and if not, can they get into the third?
To the speedster idea, everyone's chasing the long ball. I saw a quote from Patrick Mahomes today. He missed Xavier Worthy 15 times last year.
Sure did. Yeah.
Worthy got open down the field, and it's almost in Mahomes' head. And, we saw Allen and Mahomes when they started kind of like throw everywhere. And these defenses kind of reined them in, and they've had their success there. It's not just the Chiefs. The Bills have kind of been lacking that deep ball for a while. And I guess, Joe, part of the question is, how badly should they want it? How much should they chase getting it back? Because if they did get it back, it could do, obviously, great things.
Well, Jeremy, we've had a lot of conversations on WGR about the vertical passing elements of this offense they just were not good this past year. Josh Allen's awesome. He's the NFL MVP. All of that's true, but it can also be true that the vertical passing game was not very good. And that is partly because of a lack of down the field receiving talent. It's also partly because of Josh Allen's ball placement down the field. It was very inconsistent. And here's the whole layer. Like, I could give you a bunch of metrics that tell you how bad the Bills' vertical passing offense was. Any way you want to measure it, it's bottom 25% of the league, bottom 8. But the troubling part with it is the Bills threw the ball down the field a ton. I mean, Josh Allen's percentage of throws 20-plus yards down the field were in the top 5 of the NFL in terms of frequency. So they were bad at it, but they did it a lot relative to the rest of the league. And so I think Josh Allen's always going to have an appetite to push the ball down the field. And I think you got to give him his best opportunity to be successful when he does that with some speed and guys that can get behind the secondary, but also not just to hit those plays, but how that can improve your overall spacing with your offense to lift the roof. And now all of a sudden your best players in the passing game are really middle of the field guys, and Kincaid and Shakir, and we'll see what happens with Coleman and Palmer and how he acclimates. But Shakir and Kincaid are your other best players offensively in the passing game. They thrive in the middle of the field. Well, that's going to be a little bit more space for them to operate if you can really push the defense and stretch them vertically. And so I do think it is important to get a guy that, not just is a fast guy, but has ball skills and ball tracking down the field that can allow Josh Allen to finish more of these very frequent shots that he likes to take down the field. And so the list of guys that I put on the board are very specific guys that are field stretchers. There's other receivers I love in this class. Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, Jack Petch out of TCU, Elik Umanor out of Stanford. There's tons of receivers I like, but that list in particular are guys that give the speed element to achieve all the stuff I just went through.
And if their pre-draft visits are showing anything, they're interested too. They had 7 receivers come in.
7, and they're all a pretty particular type. Guys that have speed, and some of those guys are literally, to me, just fast guys that I don't really love. But there are some pretty intriguing players that have well-rounded skill sets, like a Torrey Horton, like an Isaac Tesla out of Arkansas, is a couple guys. Jalen Royals, I love that guy. where I think you probably have to pick him at 62 if you're going to get him. But they definitely had a type in mind when they brought guys in for visits.
No, there's not much to build on that. I mean, I think that's a huge point, is if we can get somebody to stretch the field, and even if it doesn't increase the number of down the field big plays, it's going to open up the underneath guys, which is where the strength of our receiver room is, right? The intermediate routes, the underneath stuff. And, you see a lot of balls that Josh Allen completes. It's not wide open guys. It's small windows, and he's throwing gas. And so I think it's going to free some things up. And like I said, I don't know if Josh Allen doesn't throw the deep ball well just because he doesn't throw well, or we just don't have the opportunities to throw it that much. I mean, he does throw it and tries to throw it, but is it really there? I mean, because we do know this. He's very confident in what he can do arm strength wise, so he will force some things, although last year he did a great job of not doing that very often. But no, just having that threat will open things up.
Well, Jerry, I think part of the issue with the accuracy down the field this year was just a product of all the receivers were new, right? Like
right.
Everyone but Khalil Shakir. And it did get better as the season moved along. Like I write an article every single week about Josh Allen and all of his metrics. I study every part of his game and I break it down. And the vertical passing game got way better as the season moved along, which I think validates my belief that a lot of this was rooted in, hey, that was probably the hard part of everything being new with the receiving core, was that chemistry down the field. I think what's interesting about, like the conversation of when to take the receiver, I think this is when you start to get intrigued by the idea of moving out of pick 30, you moving back, and then you move back to a certain point and you can probably get a 3 back in a trade out. Even if you move subtly back, like say you move back to the Giants pick at 35, well, you charge them a quarterback tax and you get a 3 for that. Right. You give something back to get the 3, and now all of a sudden you're looking at 4 picks on day 2, and it's like, okay, we can do the 3 things we want to do on defense, and we have the ammo to get the receiver.
Let me bring this to you. And the Buffalo Bills have interviewed him at the Combine. They brought him in for a top 30 visit, and that's the tailback blue from Texas, right? And if you look at his skill set, while he's probably not the zone runner that the Bills love, the patient guy that can hop back behind blocks and things like that, he is a slasher. He is an absolute killer running wheel routes and deep crossing routes out of the backfield. Is that an area that you think could help the Buffalo Bills, bring in a guy like that into the offensive backfield? Now you talk about numbers at tailback, that adds somebody and you got to do some things. But to me, it was intriguing anyway that they talked to him at the Combine. They brought him in for a top 30 visit. And when you see that skill set he has, he gets downfield and makes big plays stretching the field.
Well, I think ideally you'd like Curtis Samuel to do that for you as a player already on the roster. Of course, the injuries took away from that, but I think you'd love for that to be the issue. And like the thing with Jaden Blue is the fumbles, right? 1 fumble every 30 touches in college, and something that got worse as it moved along. And I think he is a guy that can separate, but I thought his hands were very inconsistent with some drops. So like there's a lot of give and take with Jaden Blue. If obviously there's an exciting ceiling if it all comes together, but I'd be worried about some of that inconsistency. But also, I mean, I don't think much of Quinn Ewers as a quarterback at Texas, and I think that probably took away from every player that's over the last 2 years at Texas was underperforming. Well, what's the problem? We got a bad quarterback here.
Right.
As we wrap things up, what's the headline tomorrow? What do you think? What I tend to think about this first round is that it'll have as much variability as we've ever seen. By this time tomorrow, we're going to be talking about 10 players we can't believe are still available, because I just think boards are going to be different. It seems to be a little bit more varied in the way these teams have evaluated these prospects this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if I had a message for Bills Mafia, is let's let this thing play out. You might go to sleep tonight not loving what the Bills do. Well, what's the whole picture look like? Because I think talent's going to fall in certain areas, and there might be opportunities where you're like, wow, I never thought that player would be there at 56 or 62, or the Bills are able to trade in the 3rd round and get that guy. Let's see the whole picture before we lose our minds after what happens tonight.
I think my dream scenario is we wake up tomorrow morning on the front page of the Buffalo News, and it says that we picked Kenneth Grant, defensive lineman from Michigan, and if it's not him, it's Derek Harmon. And then at some point we move our 4s and get into the 3rd, and we've got 4 picks in the top 3 rounds, and we're obtaining talent. Obviously, that's my dream scenario. Will that happen? Oh, who knows? I hope, but probably not. The interesting thing for me tonight's going to be, what is the absolute chaos that revolves around Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart, and how does that affect everything in the flow of the first round?
To that point, if the quarterbacks are still on the board, Joe, you mentioned the quarterback tax, there could be 3 trades up into the first round at the back end of the first to get Sanders and Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe. I mean, all 3 of those guys, it wouldn't be stunning at all to see them go between 20 and 32. And if that's the case, the prices might actually not be that big, because now I've got a lot of teams that are open to these calls. So, we'll have to see how it plays out. But it's exciting. It's exciting. Bills to pick 30th overall, maybe. Stick and pick, move up. We'll find out. And we'll be back Monday to break down the whole draft class, the whole process, everything that came with it. Exciting times. Final prediction. I just want to say, if it's Kenneth Grant, it feels like 3 months of talking about it. It was like, well, they took the guy we thought they were going to take the whole time, which is good. Kenneth Grant, there's a lot to like.
Yeah, especially after I spent so much time saying, I don't think Kenneth Grant's going to get there, not the top. And then he gets there. What if he gets there and the Bills don't pick him? That's going to be going to be interesting.
Don't say that.
That's why my mock drafts has Kenneth Grant. I'm not changing my mind now. That's what I think the Bills are going to do.
All right. I think defensive tackle as well. If we're going just position, I think the very heavy favorite is defensive tackle. And, maybe they just find somebody else along the way they like too much. All right. Joe Marino, Jerry O. I'm Jeremy White. This has been Bills Squad, part of the Locked On Bills podcast. Thanks to everybody who peaked at like 800 at the end there. A lot of viewers on YouTube. Yeah, we're on a live stream Mondays and Thursdays. You're, of course, finding this wherever you find your podcasts, and we'll be back Monday. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Much love. Go Bills.